tuning into my Q&A this week. As you probably noticed, I took a break from the Q&A videos and made a few vlogs, just because there was some stuff that I thought could actually get like an entire video rather than being just a part of a Q&A. And judging by how this was received, then you guys liked that, and that was okay. Otherwise, you can of course just let me know in the comments if you really want to have weekly Q&As. But I think it's good to just break it up a bit and do some other things once in a while. So I made this video on top 5 books that I studied with and the one I'm practicing. In this Q&A I'm gonna talk about sight reading, I'm gonna talk about the length of my beard, left hand speed, how to prepare for an audition if you're applying for a jazz school, and about Allan Holdsworth. So when this video goes up, then I already launched my Patreon page, so you might already have seen that coming along in your Facebook feed or on your YouTube feed. But just to talk shortly about it, I decided to make a Patreon page for my YouTube lessons, so my weekly YouTube lessons, so that you guys who are really sort of checking out my lessons and all the time and also want to support them and keep them free, you can support my lessons. You can do that already for like $4 or $5 US every month. And of course it goes higher, whatever you want, and then I can also give you something back for your support. So there are rewards for different types of funding that you give me, so I can give you some downloads of licks and exercises, some extra stuff for the lessons, and also access to some of the web store lessons, and also a monthly code melody. At least those are the things that I'm planning to do right now. It might change along the way because I want to hear what you guys want also, so that's going to have an influence as well. So I decided to make a Patreon page because the lessons are getting received really well and getting watched a lot, and there's a lot of discussion going on YouTube around them. And it would just be nice to have a place where that discussion can maybe go a bit further, and where I can give a little bit more detailed answers to some things, and also a place where you guys who are really following the lessons like that can post your questions if there's something you're working on, if you want to hear an idea on that. And at the same time, I can also give you some previews on what I'm planning to do with lessons, and hear what you guys think about that, and also what you want to hear and what you want to see in the lessons, and get more details so that I can make lessons that fit you guys even better. So that's sort of the main goal of my Patreon page. And if you want to be a part of that community, then check out the page. There's a link in the description, and I'll link to it in the video, and have a look and see if it's something that you want to be a part of. Have any sight reading tips? One of my former teachers in Denmark once told me that if you're a guitar player and you're sight reading, then the most important tool that you have is probably a volume pedal. Because if something that's really difficult to read comes along, then you can just discreetly turn down the volume of the guitar. And so that would be sort of tip number 1, really, get a volume pedal. It's very handy for this. But on a more serious note, there are a lot of things that you can take into consideration if you want to sight read stuff. So I take it that this sight reading is stuff that you really need to do that in a band situation. Otherwise it's not really, otherwise you don't have to, and then there's no need to do it really. Of course you want to practice it, but that's something else. So if you're sight reading something in a band situation, you're probably sight reading a piece of music, like in a big band or wherever you need to sight stuff, but it usually is going to be in, at least I find myself reading mostly in sort of bigger contexts, so bands with several people. So the first thing you want to do is actually not really going to be about reading the notes themselves. You want to give yourself a foundation of what you have to do. So when I get a piece of music that I have to read, I try to look at the tempo and the subdivision, so that you know what kind of subdivision to expect, what kind of if it's swing, if it's straight, and you know, just really basic stuff about how the rhythms that you have to read are sounding. You want to be aware of that, of course, because you have to read them and you have to hear them in your head before you play them. So that's important. The form of a piece is also really important. So if you can always tell what the form of a piece is, but if you have an idea about it, if you're in a big band and it's a standard that you know, be aware of what the form is, because it's going to help you keep track of what is going on. If you get a part of the sight reading that's really difficult, you might get lost, or you might mess it up, and then you have to sort of keep track of where you are, and that's a lot easier if you know the form. because then you can just hear, well, now we're 8 bars later or stuff. And that's also why it can be very difficult to read stuff where if people are not writing sort of normal periods, so you have stuff that's like 5 bar periods or stuff like that. If you're not aware, then that's very difficult to hear and feel what's going on, because we actually rely a lot on the 2, 4, 8 bar periods. We kind of feel those instinctively, because most music is like this. Yeah, so form, key, you want to notice what key this is in also, because most music is tonal, so it is in a key, and you want to know sort of what to expect, and also that's going to make it a lot easier for you to read it efficiently. So maybe just to go into actually reading the music, because these are all sort of general things you do before you start reading, and that's just going to help you, and also going to help you, especially going to help you not getting lost while you're reading, because that can also be difficult. So when you're reading music, so since it's in a key, the better you understand the music, the easier it's going to be to read. So the point of reading music, what you have to do is that you need to sort of put it into chunks and read the chunks. And most people read chunks of a half bar in jazz, I think, or a whole bar. It depends. But you read in sort of these bigger chunks, and if you understand what it is you have to play, then it's easier to put stuff into chunks, and it's also technically going to be easier. So for instance, if you're reading a piece in A flat major and there's a C minor 7 arpeggio, then that's a diatonic arpeggio, and you already hopefully know where your C minor 7 arpeggio is in your A flat major scale. So wherever you're playing that, you already have sort of a technical solution as to how to play that in that position. So that means that once you have the key and you know the diatonic chords, then that's going to help you solve the problem of actually playing what's on the page and understanding it and putting it into chunks. And that's really important, I think. And the better you get at analyzing and understanding the music that you have to play, the easier that's gonna get, simply. And then you're gonna go, for me, I think I go beyond just knowing the diatonic chords, as strictly the 7 diatonic chords, but also just what you can expect. So in A flat major, I have a good understanding on what kind of arpeggios I'm gonna expect on 4 minor chords and cadences to the 4 or the 5 or 5, and all these kind of different functions that are very normal if you're playing this, of course, in a jazz context, obviously. So those kind of things. And I think you'll find also in more modern pieces that it's still music is basically simple. So the melodies are mostly going to be really related to the chords that are under them. The better you understand the chords and the better you understand the kind of harmony that's going on, the easier it's going to be to read it. And the more different types of arpeggios and shapes and small, because they are all small melodies, and the more familiar you are with them and the more used you are to reading them, the easier it's going to be to sight read whatever is in front of you. So those are sort of the main things in terms of reading. And then because I'm not sure, this is not really about sight reading practice, it's more about how it is when you're actually sight reading. Maybe also because I never really practiced sight reading, to be honest. I think I just did it on the job, really. And I also guess, but if I was to practice it, I would really just put on the metronome. I did do that a bit, but not really a lot. Just put on the metronome on 2 and 4 and then try to read some charge. And then you're in the same situation and you still want to do the things that I talked about. And of course you need to find a tempo where it makes sense. But I think it's for me it's been really useful to have all this analytical knowledge that I can easily analyze a melody or a written out solo or stuff like that, because of course some of the parts you have to play are kind of dense. They're not going to be just like a standard melody, they're going to be more like a bebop theme or somewhere in between, right? So that way of thinking is useful. And this is also a good description of why I don't like, for instance, that we write stuff out with accidentals if it's in a key, because I think that's really really silly. And another thing that's a part of that is also that we hear things in a key. So if you know what key it's in, you can actually hear the notes, and you actually know that what you're going to play kind of sounds like, and that makes it so much easier to play, because then you can just look at the page and then have an idea about how that's going to sound, and then playing it is not going to be really that difficult, I think. So you want to build that skill a bit as well, and that's really from thinking in a key for the ear training, because you may or may not be aware that we hear stuff, at least most people do hear stuff related to a key, because all the children's songs and all the stuff that we grew up with are in a key, so we hear everything relative to the root, and you can use that to hear stuff if you want to sight read also, but you can practice just singing parts for that, I think. So those will be my tips. Not sure if it's really what you're looking for, because the question is a bit short, but at least I think they're valid if you're really trying to sight read in a band situation. So I hope it helps a bit. Do you miss the length of your beard from a year ago? So Sean Daniel is of course keeping it real with his questions here, and I have indeed experimented a bit with how long my beard was. I think it's not a year ago, it was like in January last that it was fairly long, and I've mostly been sort of focusing on whether it affects my tone or my technique, and I have discovered that if I don't cut it, it actually grows longer and it can get pretty long, but it doesn't really seem to have a real impact on my tone or on how easily I play. So it's not that like if I have a longer beard then I have more sustain. At least that's not what I've seen until now, but I'm probably going to keep on experimenting with it in the coming months. Here's a question for you, Jens. What do you think of Allan Holdsworth? He seems totally unique to me, unique sound, unique harmony. There's no one like him. Sadly underexposed these days. I'm really an Allan Holdsworth fan for sure. I've been listening, I still listen to him quite regularly. There are a few records that I really like from him. I think probably my favorite record, which I'll link to in the description as well, is called 16 Men of Tame, which is sort of one of his more jazzy records. There's not a lot of fusion that I really like, to be honest. Most of the time fusion is just not really my genre. But Holdsworth, the way he plays fusion, I've always liked that quite a lot. I think also his soloing is probably more jazzy than it is bluesy, which is sometimes the thing that I can get a little bit tired of with fusion, is that it seems to be sort of playing pentatonic scales over complicated chords all the time. He doesn't have that at all. So the 60 Men of Tame is definitely, I think, something that's a must in terms of modern jazz guitar records, even though I think it's already 20 years old, but it's a great record. I think he plays well on it. He plays really great on it actually, and the band sounds good. There's a guest trumpet player called Walt Fowler, who also plays some amazing solos on some of the pieces. So that's really worthwhile checking out. I'll link to it in the description. You can check it out there. So in terms of sound, he does have a unique sound in the way. I think the sound is actually more in some choices that he makes. So in general, he plays all the melodies with a clean sound, with a lot of delay and reverb, I think. He sometimes uses a guitar synthesizer also. And then most of his lead stuff is with a more of like an overdrive sound, and he kind of sticks to that. It's a little bit like Wes has a certain build up in his solos. Allan Holdsworth has this thing that the themes are with a clean sound and the solos are with an overdrive sound, and I think that makes. Well, I think he needs the overdrive sound for his technique because he uses a lot of legato, or I suspect that it's like that. And I guess what I like about him is that he plays he plays some melodies that are different. I think there's not. Of course he has a style in terms of harmonizing that he uses, like all the sort of really big chords with lots of large intervals and stuff like that, and then also combined with really stuff like this. That's also one of the things he uses harmonizers for. Once in a while he'll have a harmonizer that will sort of add harmony in a funny place, and in that way create some interesting chords. At least he does that, I think, on 2 tracks on 16 Men of Tame. The music is often with shifting meters, even also in the solos, which it's very tricky to handle, but he does it quite well. And also, but it doesn't stay. I saw him live once, and they also just go for it, and once in a while they get lost and stuff happens, and that's actually interesting too. And I also like that approach. I think it's better if you play a little bit on the edge and you push yourself into new territory and you take some chances, and then as long as we get out again together, then it's fine. You know, that it's part of improvising, really. So much for that. A funny anecdote about Holdsworth is actually that one of my first electric guitar teacher gave me a tape, because that's that long ago that I started having electric guitar lessons, of different things that I had to check out, and for some reason he gave me a copy of actually a record I still listen to a lot, which is called Metal Fatigue, which is Holdsworth, also with a vocalist. The vocalist is maybe not always that great, but the playing on that record is fantastic. But for some reason I thought that was Van Halen, because I also was getting some copies of Van Halen. I didn't know what was what, and I never heard Van Halen or Allan Holdsworth. So in the beginning, when I listened to Allan Holdsworth, I actually thought that it was Van Halen. But I think it took a few weeks and then I figured it out. This is before the internet, so I couldn't just Google it, obviously. But yeah, so that's a weird anecdote. And then, okay, so the thing with melodies, I think he's mostly famous for always playing legato lines really fast, wide intervals and stuff like that, which is of course a huge part of his playing. But actually, I think what attracts me to it is that he doesn't. He still plays. If you really transcribe some of his stuff, he does still play changes for a big part. He will have like these long chromatic things that are, I think, pretty much atonal, or maybe they're tonal, but they don't really have sort of a real diatonic scale around them. There's some use of some funny scales, like augmented scales and stuff like that, but not. I don't think really a lot, actually, to be honest. But maybe I analyzed it wrong, the stuff that I know. But I really like the fact that he plays really melodic, but in a way where it's immediately melodic, but it's also surprising. So he doesn't have any bebop cliches. He doesn't go for the blues thing. So like I said, like there's a lot of fusion that's just a bunch of blues licks in a funny pentatonic over a chord, and he doesn't have that at all, and that I really like about him. So in that way, I think he has a unique voice. In terms of his choice of melodies, and I think that's the main thing I really listen for with him. And to some degree, I also think that it's part of what I like about him is that I don't get it. So it's not predictable to me, and I always have to wonder about what he's doing. So for that, but yeah, I think really, if you want to hear some of his best playing, I think 16 Men of Tame is really worthwhile checking out. That's at least. Definitely my favorite record. Another record that I listen a lot to. Those actually the two records I listen the most to are Metal Fatigue and 16 Men of Tame. So and if you have other suggestions, then you can always leave a comment. It's well worthwhile checking out Holdsworth, that's for sure. Just because he's so different from anything else you'll come across. What are the best things to help me prepare for jazz school in March? This question probably needs a little bit of explanation because it's only part of or the beginning of a discussion or a conversation that I had on YouTube with him, and it is actually about auditioning for a jazz school. So the things that I think you need to pay attention to with that, I've only been sitting in commissions for entrance exams a few times, but on the commission side. So, but I do have things that I think that you need to think of when you're trying to choose repertoire. Obviously, this is for an audition in March, so it's a bit late with getting any real feedback that you can actually put into use. But still, it's a good subject also because there are a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people that are doing auditions and are sending me videos of their playing because they're sending those to auditions as well and stuff like that. So it's probably relevant to a lot of people. And I remember auditioning myself also, and that's nerve-wracking, obviously. So what should you focus on? I think, of course, any school will have a list of requirements. So of course you need to check that out. If you're applying somewhere, look at what they ask of you and do that as well as you can, whatever it is that they want to. So if there's certain repertoire, you need to check that out. If there are certain technical things or theory things that you need to be able to do, learn that. I can't tell you because I don't know what the requirements are for all schools, obviously. But it's always something you want to check, and it's important. You really want to check that out, and you also really want to just pretty much nail that. So the best thing I can talk about here is just that really when you're doing audition and you're playing pieces, because I think in all auditions, hopefully you have to perform a piece, and or 2 or 3. So the thing you want to focus on with that, and that probably is to make sure that you choose pieces that are not too easy, obviously. And also they have to fit with whatever you're applying for. So you have to know about the school and what they want to hear. If they don't actually have like required pieces that you have to do, that's quite common also. That they'll say, well, I want to hear blues in B flat and a rhythm change or something like this. So that's also common. But otherwise, then just look at what kind of education is it. And how are the students playing and who were educated there and what do they want to hear. You can even ask them. Often they will be quite happy to tell you. I mean, that's in their interest as well. So that's just in choosing the right pieces. Like that's important. So don't choose. Don't show up with Steve Vai solo if you're applying to a school that only does mainstream jazz. That's sort of the main thing. The next thing you want to think about is let's look at how you play it. So make sure that you take a piece that's not too difficult, because you have to be able to play it possibly with people you don't know, and also you have to play it in a really stressful situation. You might not be able to bring your own amp and stuff, so there can be all kinds of considerations in that. So you don't want to rely too much. Very often you don't want to rely too much on effects and stuff like that. You want to keep it to pieces that you can just play with a guitar and a cable and people you don't know. I think that's very often how the entrance exams are, or the auditions. So be aware of that, and that's also how you want to sort of structure the pieces. So don't come with really complicated arrangements that you don't know if the people who are going to be accompanying you can actually play. In some schools you get time to prepare, in some schools you don't. So they have to be able to sight read it, and if it's really difficult, then that might prove to be a problem. So if you show up with a minor blues in 11/8, then that might not be the thing that the rhythm section can actually play, and that's not going to help your entrance exam at all. So be aware of that. So keep it sort of simple in that respect as well. And then also for you, when you play it, it has to be so that you can play it under pressure. You can show what you can do without having to stretch yourself. So I think most teachers in a commission like that can actually tell what you can do from how you play something. And if you try to play something difficult, then the only thing you can tell is usually that it's that this is sort of the prepared difficult thing. It's always going to come across as being a little bit less musical if you do that, at least in my experience. So you want to keep it simple, play the pieces in a solid, simple way, make music, react to who's playing around you, if you can, at least. And I think those are sort of the things you want to take into consideration. So the thing is, there is just like, don't take too many risks with the repertoire. So it has to be easy for the people. It has to be readable for the people who are accompanying you. if you don't bring your own band. And it also has to be something that you can sort of comfortably really make music with, even in a situation like that. So if it's on the edge, you might fall off, and you don't want to have that. So that's, I think that would be sort of the main things to sort of work on. So I hope that helps a bit. And otherwise, good luck with your audition, and let me know how it goes. What are your hints, if any, for increasing speed? I have enough musical theory knowledge to be able to construct solos over chords, etc., but I don't know how I can get my left hand speed to the next level. This question turned into a small conversation, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about that also, because my experience is with speed that usually the left hand is not really the sort of the limiting factor. That's at least for me the case, and it's also mostly the case for students, I think. At least that's what I sort of remember and see right away. So we talked a little bit about that, because I think that that's how it is for most people. But at the same time, if you want to increase the speed of your left hand, there is stuff you can work on. I guess where I learned the most in terms of that is actually a really long time ago when I learned some tapping stuff, because tapping is sort of a little bit easier in terms of coordination, and you can then just really speed it up to some fairly high speeds, and it just helps your left hand move fast. So even though that's not sort of the kind of thing that you would expect to be practicing a lot if you're trying to learn jazz guitar, which is likely if you're on my channel, but it actually is really a good exercise for this. It's just a bit hard to sort of apply it to any kind of real jazz music, but you can always look at it as a sort of an exercise just to develop some technique. If you don't want to do that, you can of course also just try to practice legato, because basically if you want to move your left hand fast and you're not worried about your right hand, then legato technique is probably going to be good. And if you can execute legato technique fast, you can also move your left hand fast enough when you're picking all the notes. So that would be something to do as well. So you can do, it's probably easier to do like three notes per string kind of stuff. So stuff like this, small exercises that are sort of easy to play. And you can of course do like whole positions, like now I did just a whole 3 note per string scale fingering. Probably if you want to get used to it first, you just want to do one or two strings. So that could be, if I take just the middle of this one, so you can just work on it like that, or maybe, and then I would quickly go to 2 strings because I think that's just more useful. I don't think you really need to do. I mean, you're just trying to move your fingers fast, really. You want to keep it in time, obviously, but for the rest, that should help you just build speed. And I think when you're taking away, the fact that you're taking away sort of the coordination aspect of it for the biggest part, you're only sort of striking the string once every time. Also, I should speed that up actually. That should make it easier for you to also then later go right? So these kind of things are the way I would approach that. Because if you take the right hand out of the equation, then it should be easy for you to speed that up. And how you want to work on it, what scale position stuff, is up to you. For it to be easy, just rhythmically yeah, well, actually, mostly for the rhythm that you can just go through a whole scale position. The 3 notes per string thing is just a lot easier. You can always start higher on the neck if that's an issue. So I would work on it like that, and then start there and see how that works. If you can do this, then you can check like how this is going with like alternating or coordinating with a pick, and see if you can translate it to that, and then that should help. The other thing is, of course, even though you can play this really fast, because I can play this quite fast, that doesn't mean that I can make lines with it. So when we're playing fast, you have to be aware that you need to have the faster and the more notes you play, the more you have to rely on knowing in advance what you want to play, and that actually means that you have to have lines you can also play fast. And that's another discussion actually, but that can also be an issue. And if you start getting some speed, at least that was for me like this, like as soon as I started to be able to actually play my scales fast and stuff like that, then I didn't have lines that I could play that fast, and I needed to build a vocabulary of lines that I could play that fast. But that's kind of another discussion, though. It's not really about left-hand speed, I guess, but that is a consequence of practicing to play fast, and it's also something you're going to run into if you want to apply it, that you want to have then also a vocabulary that actually is playable fast, and that you can rely on when you have to play it, because you don't have time to think about all the notes, and you don't have time, it has to be more automatic than that. But you can always ask me about that if you run into that problem also. So I hope this helps a bit. Otherwise, I'm curious. I mean, I think it's interesting because for me it's a question that that surprised me in the sense that it's not where I find the problems with speed normally, and that makes it just interesting to check out. So any feedback you have on what I'm saying is useful for me, because then I learn something, and that's really great when I do these Q&A videos also. That was some answers to some of the questions I got from you guys, some serious and some less serious, obviously. If you have anything you want to contribute to the conversation here, so this last question on left-hand speed I think was interesting. Is this something that you can relate to? Do you also have this idea that your left hand is actually the limiting factor in your technique? Then I would actually be curious to know that, because I find that kind of interesting, both just as a teacher, but also just maybe I'll learn something from that as well. So because that's always great about these Q&A videos, I get to learn stuff as well. Another thing is, if you have a favorite Allan Holdsworth album, which one is that? Maybe it's one I don't know. So because I don't think I know all of them actually, but I'm not sure. Let me know. That's always interesting also to get some new music to listen to. If you wanna support me making these videos, and also of course the YouTube lessons on Thursday, then check out my Patreon page. Maybe think about joining that community. You can do that already from $4 or $5 a month, because it's $1 per YouTube lesson. So that's 4 or 5 lessons every month is $4 or $5. And of course there are more, and there are rewards and other things. Check it out. Hopefully you can join us there. And that's about it for this week. There's a new lesson on Thursday, and I'll see you later.